I've played with nunchucks before, but never truly learned them. So this week I decided to change that and just go full cowabunga, dude, and learn 3 spinning techniques with these wooden nunchucks. Because it's such an unstable weapon, first I had to understand a little about how the nunchucks works. For example, the wrists are very important to generate the flow within the movements. Another important thing was to hold the nunchucks closer to the chains. I also made the amazing discovery that the nunchucks should not hit my body. It must swing and distribute its energy around my body and thus returning for a blow or transition. Another thing is that if a hand is not controlling the nunchucks, then it must protect the head, ideally. So first I practiced straight strikes, from and back the armpits, and on the diagonals. Then it was time for circular blows, in all directions as well. And finally I dedicated myself to the simplest hand swipes, at least one for each height. When I felt comfortable enough, it was time to get the first spinning technique, the infinite wrist roll. It is basically a variation of this other simple wrist transition, in which one hand is facing up and the other is facing down. And then what you have to do is to direct each stick to opposite directions, following the hand that is facing down. Then the hand that was facing upwards will turn downwards to get the nunchucks at the end of the spin. And so the movement can start over on the other side. In the beginning, I just couldn't alternate between left and right, but after a lot of practice, the transition became decent enough. Now, to make the infinite wrist roll, I just had to do the same movement as before, but now the transition should be made by just one hand. What is easier said than done? At the end of each spin, I had to let the movement continue and alternate the direction with the same hand. I would be happy to move on to the next stage if I did 10 consecutive infinite wrist rolls. But as much as I tried, the nunchucks would wrap around my wrists or just didn't want to be in my hand at all for some reason. But the next day, after many other mistakes, I understood that I was taking too much time to let go of the nunchucks within each spin. And then, this happened. I was so happy to have achieved this, I even entered that little portal behind the tree. It was time for the second technique, which for me is the easiest of the 3. It consists of drawing a figure 8 in front of the body with a wrist roll on each side. The idea is to first do it without the wrist rolls, and once you understand the spin, just slowly add the wrist roll to each side. The right side wasn't problematic for me, but doing it with the left was a challenge. What really helped me was to find out how to transfer from one side to the other while keeping the figure 8 design. The best way I can describe this transition is like this. At the end of the wrist roll, you make a butterfly shape with both hands with the palms facing up. The idea is to release the nunchucks at the top of the spin when it's touching the back of the opposite hand. So with that, I was able to practice the figure 8 alternating both sides with little to no trouble, until I felt it was good enough to move on to the third technique. The so-called Mega Pinwheel. By far the most complicated of them all, but also the coolest. The movement starts in front of the body with the figure 8 like we did before, but then at the second wrist roll, it goes behind the back where hand transition occurs by holding the same stick. Hence a wrist roll in the opposite hand and a transition over and behind the head. And so the movement shapes itself as a circle around the upper body. My whole focus was on making the sequence as fluid as possible for at least 5 complete cycles. But for some reason, I just couldn't do the behind the back transition. It was as if the nunchucks suddenly hit the brakes in midair and the circle was lost. The first day trying this technique, I did my best and trained until my hands couldn't take it anymore. And the next day, I still couldn't do it. The sticks would hit my fingertips, which hurt a lot, my back and my elbows. As much as I insisted, there was clearly something I wasn't understanding. It got to the point where I was able to draw a very bad circle several times, but it was not the result I wanted. I practiced so much that the nunchuck screws couldn't take it, and one of the sticks ended up losing itself and flying mid-training. I tried to insist anyway, but the possibility of the stick flying onto my face didn't really motivate me much. So it was time to go home and review the tutorials. First of all, there is a transition of the body weight, with a hipping version as the nunchucks change sides. This is what sets the body more laterally and makes the rotation easier. Second, there are two simple spins that occur at the bottom of each side of the circle. One at the bottom right and one at the bottom left. These two smaller spins give more flow and aesthetics to the entire movement and, more importantly, facilitate the behind the back transition I was having so much difficulty with. It was time to fix the nunchucks and try again. And until this happened. There's still a lot to improve, of course, but I was very satisfied with the result. It really is amazing what you can do with a few days of practice, huh? Every week on this channel I learn different skills while documenting the process. Subscribe for more content like this. You can also find me on Instagram. Bye bye!